And so back to Australia and the Regent Honeyeater. It doesn't hum, but it is in danger. Matthew Crawford is there in the field in northeastern Victoria.
The Regent Honeyeater is critically endangered. We think the population in the wild is 500 birds or less, and if we don't do something to arrest those declines, within a decade or two we could have no Regent Honeyeaters left in Australia.
So there is a sense of urgency about the work he's doing here. That's Dean Ingwersen. We're at Chilton Mount Pilot National Park in the northeastern corner of Victoria near Albury-Wodonga. It's really been rainy here, but it's not holding back anyone as they get ready to release some captive-bred Regent Honeyeaters into the wild. Dean's dashed off with his camera, but I've got someone else here to tell me what's going on.
Yeah, Glen Johnson. I'm the Senior Biodiversity Officer with Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. And this is the exciting part. This is the culmination of many, many years. And as we speak, the lucky 10 people are approaching the tents now, and they're getting ready to do the unzipping.
They're Regent Honeyeaters that hail from Taronga Zoo in Sydney. They've been working on captive breeding for 20 years. The birds here are aged about 5 to 18 months.
So yeah, roughly there's 38 birds that we're releasing today. So the first couple of tents are mainly the radio transmitted birds. So these are the ones which have got transmitters on and they're long antenna, which enables us to do the tracking.
So all of you, 38 birds today? Not all of them have the radio transmitters, right?
About half, yeah. Ooh, there's a bird just about I can see come to the edge of...
Oh, I can see some movement in there.
Yeah. So birds... There's one. Okay. One's just come out. One has the first release. 2 birds have come out.
Well, welcome to your freedom, Regent Honeyeaters.
They're in 3, 4, 5. 5 birds from one tent. It's just come out. 6 birds. And they've all gone into the blossom, which has been placed in shrubs only 2-3 metres out from the tent.
Oh, you've actually put some blossom out to lure them, haven't you?
Yeah, and these birds have been... And there's 7 out now. One's flying underneath the tarp and come out again. So we've got... There's the first... 3 birds.
Right above us.
Right above us. So that's
beautiful.
Oh, look at this. Look at that. That is incredible. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 birds have all taken flight above us. And now 11, 12, 13. And they're all the birds from the tents which have got the radio transmitters. So
you're feeling good about this, yeah?
They're all ticking and they're underway now.
And with those tents open and those birds free, I can grab Dean Ingwersen again. He's with BirdLife Australia and he brings together state governments, universities and other groups in his work as the National Regent Honeyeater Recovery Coordinator. So how's it going?
Fantastic. It's been a really great morning. Despite the rain, they've probably defied my predictions at least. I thought they would have stayed in the tents for a bit longer, but we got a really good rush of birds as soon as we opened the tents. We had a nice flock of... It was amazing. Just such a thrill to see birds come out like that. When you get a flock of Regent Honeyeaters fly around your head, it's really like turning back the clock and seeing Regent Honeyeaters as they should be. You know, we should see them in flocks and in the landscape, so it's a really positive experience.
Just describe to me the plight that the Regent Honeyeater has found itself in.
Yeah, it's a sobering thing to think that Regent Honeyeaters are critically endangered, so they're one step away from extinct and we'll never see them again in the wild. If we turn back the clock 100 years, 150 years, they occurred in thousands in some locations in good years. You would get flocks of hundreds of them moving around the landscape. At the moment we have an estimate for the population of about 500 at most across the whole range. So that's from southern Queensland down to central Victoria. So it's the proverbial needle in the haystack when you're trying to find them in the wild.
What are some of the reasons for the decline?
Yeah, it's a really typical case in terms of conservation. It's habitat loss. That's the primary driver for why Regent Honeyeaters are in the situation they're in now. If you consider southeastern Australian woodlands, which they would have used historically, we've cleared 85 to 90% of those, and we've preferentially cleared the best bits. So all of those beautiful lowland fertile woodlands that had really big trees and would produce great nectar flows, we've now got crops and we raise livestock on them. So we've lost habitat out of the system, and we've also in the process created beautiful habitat for things like noisy miners. So it's a double-edged sword in that we love birds, and particularly noisy miners. They're a native bird and they're very charismatic, but they're real bullies, and so they like habitat that's fragmented and chopped up. And it means that if Regent Honeyeaters, which we know can move long distances, if they're on migration between flowering events, they land in an area, they're going to get beaten up by noisy miners. So as well as reducing the amount of habitat, what's left is also full of bullies. So there's a multitude of factors that start to build up. And then the pervasive threat that exists for everything now is changing climate, which ultimately changes the way trees flower and the nectar available. So that's something that's hard to manage, but it's probably going to have an impact. If trees don't flower and provide nectar often enough, then there's not the resources there for them to feed on.
So what they can do around here is control the numbers of noisy miners. And Dean knows this doesn't sit well with everyone, but before the Regent Honeyeater release, they went shooting to reduce noisy miner numbers. They say it's instant, and they think it's the most humane way. Also, there's work going on to protect and improve native vegetation. So that could be cooperating with landowners to plant native trees, or working with those who want to put conservation covenants on their land. So that was Dean Ingwersen, who's the National Regent Honeyeater Recovery Coordinator. And here's someone who's testing how effective all this work is.
I'm Gemma Taylor. I'm from the UK and I'm doing my PhD with the University College London, Zoological Society of London and Monash University here in Melbourne.
And what's your project?
I'm hopefully going to research the efficacy of reintroduction programs, look at what contributes to their success and how the birds do once they've been released, look at the survival of the birds and look at other impacts such as the noisy miner control and the revegetation of the landscape.
And she's holding a big radio antenna in one hand, and it's connected to some receiver gear that's hanging off her shoulder.
I'll find one that's fairly close. North, east, south, west. So the strongest beat was south. So now that's quite a low gain, so we would head off in that direction and try and track him down to his location.
If you're going to take a guess, how distant do you reckon the bird might be now?
He would have been moving around in the area, but at the moment he's probably on a flowering tree about 200 metres away, and he's probably with some others, so we'll track him, and once we find him we'll have a scan and see if we can find any others that are with him.
The transmitters don't last forever, but
No.
what kinds of information can you get that's going to help measure the efficacy of the release?
Well, survival, so they're going to last about 12 weeks, so we'll track them.
That's the transmitters we're talking about, not the birds.
No, yeah, definitely the transmitters. So that'll give us an idea of how long they're surviving after they've been released. If we track them every day, we can say, OK, well, in the first week, 100% have survived. Second week, 90%, something like that. We'll also see where they're going, which trees they're feeding from, interactions with other birds. Are they flocking together? Are they on their own? Because we've already had some that have been off on their own, whereas others are flying around in small groups. So it gives us a lot of information about how the birds are using the park, their ecology and their behaviour, and ultimately their survival.
And what's your gut feeling at this point in terms of how this might work out, do you know?
My gut feeling has been really, really positive. The birds are feeding, we've seen them moving around. There's been no negative information back yet. So gut feeling has been really good. Fingers crossed, yeah.
Gemma Taylor, and I'll leave you with Dean Ingwersen.
In my mind, I feel like we're making a difference and we are actually putting birds into the landscape and it's helping to hold the decline. At the same time, we also know from the monitoring that we do that post-release they can breed after we've let them go. We've seen captive release birds breed with wild birds, and we've seen captive release birds from 2013 pair up with captive release birds from 2010. So I feel like we've got to the point with the release program that we're making a difference. And it's also probably coinciding with the time where our long-running revegetation programs and the habitat's getting old enough for the trees we've put into the ground that they'll start to support Regent Honeyeaters. So we're not going to kid ourselves. We've still got a long way to go, but I feel like we're just on the cusp of really getting a stronghold and a foothold in saving this bird.
Dean Ingwersen saving our birds with Matthew Crawford. And don't miss Matthew's Tweet of the Week on Sunday Extra with Jonathan Green.